If this river were to stop, the city would stop with it. Before roads, before railways, before engines, London moved by water. The River Thames was not scenery, it was infrastructure. In the early 18th century, nearly everything that entered or left London passed along this narrow stretch of water. Timber, food, fuel, cloth, and tools arrived here first, long before they reached the streets. The river determined where docks were built, where warehouses stood, and where people lived and worked. Movement followed the rhythm of tide and daylight. Ships waited for favorable currents. Labor began with the morning light and ended when darkness fell. There were no machines to override nature. The river set the schedule. London did not grow outward at random. It grew along the Thames. This was not just a river beside the city. It was the city's spine.
Watch that barrel, it's heavy. Easy now.
Nothing here moves on its own. Every object you see is moved by human strength. In the early 18th century, the docks of the Thames operated without engines, cranes, or machines. Cargo was lifted, dragged, and carried by hand. Barrels were rolled across timber planks. Sacks were hauled on shoulders. Ropes and leverage replaced machinery. This work demanded coordination. One mistake could injure a worker or damage valuable goods. Experience mattered more than speed. Each task followed routines, learned over years, passed from one laborer to another. Thousands depended on this system. The port provided work, but it also consumed bodies. Strength faded, injuries accumulated. Yet the labor continued day after day because London's economy depended on it. Trade moved forward, powered not by technology, but by endurance.
On this river, control is never absolute. Movement depends on forces no one can command. In 1700, navigation on the Thames relied on wind, tide, and judgment. Ships could not move freely at will. They waited for favorable currents, adjusted to shifting water levels, and advanced slowly through crowded channels. Timing mattered as much as direction. Sailors worked constantly, tightening rigging, adjusting sails, and responding to subtle changes in wind. Smaller boats assisted larger vessels, guiding them through narrow or busy stretches of the river. Communication was essential. Voices, hand signals, and shared experience kept ships from colliding. Without engines or modern navigation tools, mistakes carried real consequences. Groundings, damaged hulls, and lost cargo were common risks. Progress required patience and skill. On the Thames, movement was negotiated, not forced.
Every movement here carries weight, and every mistake carries consequence. Along the docks of the Thames, productivity came at a physical cost. Heavy barrels, wet timber, and shifting ships created a dangerous environment. Slips, crushed hands, and strained backs were part of daily life. There were no safety standards, no protective equipment, and no guarantees. Work continued despite the risks. Goods had to move, schedules had to be met, and ships could not wait indefinitely. Laborers relied on experience and caution, learning where to step, when to pull, and how to balance their bodies against the load. Injuries were common, but rest was rare. Missing a day of work meant losing wages. For many, endurance was not a choice, but a necessity. London's trade expanded not because labor was safe, but because it was relentless.
On the Thames, visibility was never guaranteed. Some days, the river simply disappeared. Fog was a constant presence in early 18th century London. Thick mist rolled in from the water, swallowing ships, docks, and buildings. Distances collapsed, familiar landmarks vanished.
What could be seen clearly one moment might be gone the next. Work did not stop, but it changed. Movement slowed. Voices carried farther than sight. Workers listened for water, wood, and footsteps, navigating by sound and memory rather than vision. Ships advanced cautiously, aware that one unseen obstacle could cause serious damage. Fog increased danger. Collisions became more likely. Theft was harder to prevent. Supervision weakened. Yet the river remained active because trade could not simply wait for clear weather. On the Thames, uncertainty was not an exception. It was part of the routine.
Then it is agreed. 40 barrels
Behind
and 20
every
shillings
movement
each.
on the
Agreed.
dock,
A
there is
pleasure
a
doing business with
decision.
you, gentlemen.
And behind every decision,
Count is
there is
correct.
money.
See it loaded.
Trade along the
Aye, sir.
Thames was
We'll
not
move it
chaotic.
directly.
It was closely observed and controlled.
Lift it up now.
Merchants
Steady,
inspected
steady.
cargo,
All right, settle
counted
down.
goods, and directed where everything should be stored. Accuracy mattered. A damaged barrel or a missing sack could mean financial loss far beyond the dock itself. These men rarely lifted cargo themselves, but their authority shaped the flow of work. Laborers waited for instructions. Ships remained idle until permission was given. Commerce depended on trust, contracts, and reputation, and forced through supervision rather than force. The docks were more than a workplace. They were a center of negotiation and power. Decisions made here affected markets, households, and livelihoods across London and beyond. Trade was not just physical movement, it was organized control.
Step back, and the pattern becomes clear. This city follows the river. By 1700, London had grown into a vast urban landscape, but its shape was not random. Docks, warehouses, workshops, and housing stretched continuously along both banks of the Thames. The river determined where industry clustered and where people settled. Proximity to water meant access to trade, employment, and opportunity. From a distance, the scale of activity becomes visible. Ships lined the river. Smoke rose from countless chimneys. Goods moved steadily from water to land. The Thames was not simply part of the city, it organized it. London expanded outward slowly, but it extended along the river relentlessly. Every bend of the Thames carried economic value. Every stretch of shoreline mattered. This was not a city with a river. It was a river city.
When the light fades, the work fades with it. There is no way to push the day any further. In early 18th century London, daylight determined productivity. As the sun dropped, activity along the Thames slowed. Tools were set aside. Ships were secured. Cargo waited where it stood. Without artificial lighting, precision work became impossible and risk increased. The docks emptied gradually. Workers left in small groups, following familiar paths away from the river. What remained was stillness. The river continued to move, but human effort paused. Evening was not a time for expansion or ambition. It was a natural boundary. The city accepted it. Work would resume tomorrow, under the same conditions, following the same routines. On the Thames, progress did not fight time, it followed it.
At night, the river remains, but the city withdraws. Darkness imposed limits that could not be ignored. Without light, movement along the Thames became uncertain and dangerous. Most work stopped completely. Ships stayed secured. Cargo remained untouched. Only a few figures lingered, watching over goods and vessels in near silence. Night was not productive time. It was a pause enforced by nature. Sounds carried farther in the dark. Water, wood, and footsteps became more noticeable. Familiar spaces felt altered. The river, once crowded and active, turned restrained and cautious. There was no effort to conquer the night. London adapted to it. Waiting became part of the system. Rest was not optional. It was required. The Thames flowed on, indifferent to darkness, but human activity could not. With the return of light, the river reveals itself again, and the city resumes its rhythm. Dawn brings visibility back to the Thames. Ships, docks, and warehouses reappear, unchanged from the day before. Workers return, repeating familiar routines. Cargo moves once more, guided by the same methods, the same limits, and the same reliance on daylight and tide. This cycle defined London in 1700. Progress did not arrive through sudden transformation, but through repetition. Day after day, the river supported the city through continuity rather than innovation. The system endured because it was predictable, not because it was efficient. London grew slowly, sustained by this rhythm. The Thames did not promise speed or ease, it offered reliability. In this world, stability was strength, and the river was its foundation.